Salvete. Welcome to Latin via Lectionary, a short Latin lesson drawn from the Sunday Mass readings. I'm Sean Burns of Latin via Liturgy, and I'm happy to share this week's lesson with you. Today, the 17th Sunday in Ordinary Time, our lesson comes from the second reading, St. Paul to the Romans. We'll take a look at indirect statement. Let's see the first verse of the reading together. Scimus autem quoniam diligentibus Deum omnia cooperantur in bonum. We know that all things work for good for those who love God. We'll take a look at a few words in particular in that passage. Indirect statement is simply the reporting of what someone knows, says, thinks, hears, etc. And so it starts with a verb that communicates that idea. Very often, he knows or he says. In this instance, we know gets us going with indirect statement. And then we have a subordinate clause. In English, we use the word that. In classical Latin, you'll recall that we use a very complicated accusative with the infinitive. Church Latin leans more towards the word quoniam, which will translate to that, in a much more simple subordinate clause with a subject and a regular verb. So quoniam and cooperantur, just a regular indicative verb to finish out the indirect statement. So let's take a look at the rule in general. In Ecclesiastical Latin or medieval Latin, quoniam plus the indicative. So quoniam is a conjunction, and it leads us into a clause with a finite verb. As I mentioned earlier, you'll recall if you studied Latin in school, the idea of the accusative and the infinitive. But Church Latin tends to make it more simple with simply quoniam plus the indicative. Scimus, we know, quoniam that, and cooperantur, they work. There are a few other options in addition to quoniam. You'll see quia at times, as in the Gospel of John here, credidi quia tu es Christus. I have come to believe that you are the Messiah. We also use quia in the Confiteor. And in medieval philosophy, St. Thomas in particular, and others very often use quod, which you see on the bottom of this slide. Dicendum quod Deum esse, quinque vis probari potest. It must be said that God's existence can be proved in 5 ways. So one more summary. Indirect statement, while in classical Latin, uses the accusative plus the infinitive. For most Christian texts, it's a much more simple construction with a conjunction, quoniam, or quia, or quod, and a subordinate clause with a regular old indicative verb. Thank you for joining me for this week's short Latin lesson. Please come back next week for another lesson from the Sunday Mass readings. Valete et bonum Dominicam.